too tall. Okay. I'm real. Can you hear me? Mom? Just kidding. She will not be watching this. I met my very first client during my clinical practicum, which was part of my master's degree in clinical psychology. He was this 16-year-old teenager who was mandated into therapy by his foster care program. He walked into the office every Monday evening looking like a badass. A loose shirt, even looser pants, and a baseball hat that was positioned in a way that prevented me from looking at all of his face. Everything about his demeanor screamed, "I don't want to be here." And I, on the other hand, was this petite 23-year-old woman who barely looked 18, had recently migrated from India, and was being a therapist for the very first time. He was resistant. I was clueless. This was a bad combination. Let's call this badass boy Sam. Sam came in each Monday, sat across from me with only a table between us, and stared at the floor the whole 45 minutes. Since I could not see his face, I could only imagine what facial expressions he held. He was perhaps poker-faced, or maybe he was sticking his tongue out at me every time I spoke. I don't know. All I knew is that I needed to get him to talk so that I had something to report to the experienced Dr. Brigman, my supervisor. I tried close-ended questions. Do you have a girlfriend? Yes. Do you have a best friend? Yes. Are you having a good day? Nope. Tell me why? Nope. Wow, what a failed attempt, I thought. I desperately moved on to open-ended questions. How was your day? Good. How was your weekend? Okay. How's your evening going? Horrible. Even though he didn't say it, I could hear the word bitch at the end of every response. I was exasperated. I was not a good question asker, I guess, if that's even a term, and I needed to do something different. Perhaps a game? Said the not-so-helpful Dr. Brigman in his, "I cannot believe I'm wasting my time on this" attitude. The following Monday, I took a deck of Uno cards to our session. Guess who played Uno? This Uno played Uno with no Uno because Sam was not interested in Uno. What next? I expectantly asked Dr. Brigman. He spontaneously handed me a paperback book on client resistance and in his nonchalant way said, "Read any chapter, apply that." I conveniently obeyed and picked a chapter that was titled "Sit with the Silence." Seemed fairly easy. Walk in, sit there, stay quiet, go home, blame Dr. Brigman and his book for the lack of interaction, still get academic credit for it. For the first time in months, I did not dread going in to see Sam. I'm not sure if I should label that session as successful, though. The thing is, I did sit with silent Sam successfully for the entire session, but by the end of it believed I could be schizophrenic because I started hallucinating Silent Night, Holy Night playing in the background. Thanks, Dr. Brigman, for this enriching experience. After 4 months of no progress with Sam, I decided it was time to give Sam a piece of my mind. I went in prepared. This time I spoke the whole 45 minutes. "You are wasting your time. I get credit for this, and why don't you use this golden opportunity given to you?" Yada, 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 yada. When he still hadn't said a word by the end of it all, I exclaimed with evident frustration, "Don't you have anything to say?" He repositioned his hat, looked at me, and uttered these words. "Can I have sex with you?" Oh my God, I did not mean to turn him on, screamed my virgin self. Frazzled, I told him we cannot have sex because the law says we cannot have sex, and sent him home. The very pragmatic Dr. Brigman seemed to take a keen interest in my experience the next day. He asked, "If the law would have been okay with you having sex with him, would you have had sex with him?" I wanted to scream, "No, Dr. Brigman," but managed to give him the right response in the right tone of voice. I would not have sex with him because this is a professional relationship, Dr. Brigman. He was pleased, but wanted me to go convey this to Sam the following Monday. Ugh. I reluctantly prepared another sermon for our next session. Careful to not repeat anything I had already said to him, lest he got sexually excited again. The following Monday, I began to deliver my lecture, meticulously timed to end at the 8-minute mark, when I noticed that Sam was shifting a lot in his chair. He can't be having a seizure, can he? I thought to myself. And I was right. He wasn't. He was simply jerking off. And if you were English, he was wanking off. And if you don't understand those Urban Dictionary terms, he was masturbating. And oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I wanted the floor to crack open and swallow me whole. And of course it didn't happen. Had anything in this whole experience gone my way so far? Instead, I managed to mumble, "Please stop." Miraculously, he did. I should have known he would. Sam had remarkable self-control when it came to speaking, so this should have come fairly easily to him. From that point onwards, he opened up. Not literally, but emotionally. He told me about how his parents had abandoned him, how he missed his girlfriend, and how he hated foster care. I learned that I could be a good therapist, that I passed all of Sam's tests, that perhaps Dr. Brigman would be better off working in a library or something like that, and that I was no longer a clueless student, that Sam was still a badass. Thank you.
Everyone here has probably tried to kill their mom at least one time, maybe in a small way. Returning a Christmas gift she spent hours choosing, forgetting to write that thank you note to her best friend who bought you that weird, ugly thing, not putting on a warm coat in the winter, refusing to get bar mitzvahed, taking a year off from college, ending up in jail for a night, that tattoo here, that piercing there, leaving your birth control lying around, quitting church, quitting piano lessons, quitting whatever they paid a fuck ton of lessons for, saying no to that second helping of her famed lasagna. I made my mom read the entire Elena Bertrand trilogy, which told the story of two girls who lived a life she would have had if she'd stayed in Italy. "You're killing me with those books," she told me. So many ways, so many wounds. My mom's murder story starts in 1961 when my parents moved from Floss Avenue in Buffalo, New York, where not only was everyone Italian, but from the same tiny town in Italy, to a new house in the suburbs, a place my mom unlovingly called the graveyard. There was much about transcending class that my mom was okay with. Nicer clothes, working car, a big house, and eventually the obligatory country club work membership. My parents joined the only club in Buffalo that accepted Italians, which was full of Italians pretending not to be Italians. The American dream was cool with her, except when it came to golf. Why would anyone who came from people who toiled in sweltering, unlucky olive fields of southern Italy, who herself started working life as a child, went through the Depression and World War II, where she fought off Mussolini supporters trapped in the States, and worked as a nurse in the Iron Lung unit during the polio epidemic, be remotely interested in chasing a tiny white ball around with a stick in swampy Buffalo, New York summer heat? Success meant being an indoor person. Now, my mother was all about speedy assimilation, but from a safe distance, like an air-conditioned, tastefully designed, earth-toned parlor with understated crystal chandeliers, sipping a chilled martini, dressed head to toe in Dior, donning a freshly coiffed Zaza Gaborish French twist, watching other people chase tiny white balls around with a stick in the swampy Buffalo, New York summer heat. The first part of this humiliation was actually perpetuated on us kids in the form of an early childhood trauma known as junior golf, where little boys and girls played golf, followed by crusty old ladies, golf biddies, shriveled and wrinkled from too many years in the sun, dressed on the horror end of ladies' golf fashion, in loud primary colors and skirts too short for their droopy knees. Every Friday in the summer, my mother piled her brood into her wood-paneled station wagon, another thing that she hated, for this weekly dreaded excursion. One Friday, I hit my ball and it fell into a hole. Not an intentional golf obstacle, but a real hole. I had the bad fortune of having the meanest son of a bitch Biddy in the bunch. She made me try to hit a ball out of a tiny hole, something even Arnold Palmer can't do, let alone a 9-year-old girl. She counted some 89 shots, making my score 115 for 3 holes. It was a record at the country club. As if the whole affair wasn't bad enough, there were award ceremonies that celebrated the best, and yeah, the worst. Me. It was like wearing a scarlet 115 on my chest for the next decade. Of course I begged my mom to quit, but she thought that her kids golfing got her out of golfing. When I graduated to teen golf, I had grown some serious golf biddy scheming skills. We would play the first hole in full view of our designated biddy, then go find a tree to read under each hole, arriving at the 9th hole just in time with a mostly made-up score. Occasionally, we would win first place with our fake score. As I accepted my bogus award, I would locate the biddy that stood watch over me during my 89 strokes, and I would give her an I'm coming for you stare. In fact, most of my teen mean girl chops come from watching the golf biddies in action. At some point, my mother was also forced to play. I remember sitting with her at the pro shop while she looked for a getup that she would actually put on. "Do you have anything in a muted taupe?" she asked the sales lady. When the shoe part came, it got considerably worse. "Is there a different style?" "Mom, golf shoes don't come with kitten heels. This is what they look like," I told her in a momming the mom moment. Seeing her all decked up on her first golf outing, I knew she wondered, did I cross an ocean for this? Had Lady Liberty carried a sign that said, "Welcome to America. By the way, you might be forced to partake in an odd leisure activity that involves unattractive shoe wear," she might have turned the ship around. I explained that golf wasn't even American. It started in Scotland in the 15th century. The Scots wear awful plaid kilts, she reminded me. She did her best to fashion it up with a sassy neck scarf, dangling earrings, and Jackie O sunglasses. Imagine Sophia Loren in golf togs. Eventually, we settled into being a golf family. It was our duty, like the American dream tax. On a balmy August evening, we were just wrapping up the 9th hole, thinking about the medium rare steaks at the clubhouse that awaited us when we finished, when the killing my mom incident happened. I hit a perfect shot out of a sand trap that probably would have gone right into the hole if my mother's left leg had not interrupted its graceful arc on the way to its final destination. It's here where the story begins to diverge. My mother called it an old faithful of gushing blood, and as time went on, she varied the water source. A Tivoli fountain of blood, Niagara Falls in reverse being my personal favorite. My mother's extensive knowledge of fountains, falls, and other watery wonders of the world did not work in my favor. I have no memory of the blood. I do remember the ambulance pulling right up to the 9th hole and the country clubbers leaving their warm steaks to check out the disaster. I just stood there on the 9th hole green, facing my accusers while they whisked my mom away, sirens blazing. And if I could hear the crowd think aloud, this one would be asking, "Isn't that the girl who shot 115 for 3 holes?" My family had to lay low for a while. My parents dropped their golf membership, and I went off to college. A decade later, when I had my wedding reception there, I would not be surprised if under the date it read, "Wedding reception of the kid who shot a 115 on 3 holes and tried to kill her mother on the 9th hole." As far as I know, after the incident, no member of the Galato family has ever held a golf club between their hands again. My mother considered the game to be dangerous, and to her and all of civilization. The story has become more dramatic over time, with even more detail in the blood-gushing part. The ninth hole incident has become the stuff of legend, haunted, with tales of blood mysteriously appearing on the green. I did not kill my mother. My mother died peacefully at age 90, with me by her side. And as for the actual golf injury, Mom was out of the hospital an hour later, home and enjoying in Manhattan, thanking me for knocking her varicose vein into oblivion. At her funeral, one of those golf biddies showed up. "Remember that time you hit a 115 for 3 holes," she said. "Really? Now?" Lucky for me, she's too old to remember the 9th hole incident. Over the years, I've given my mother many gifts: 2 adorable grandchildren, bizarre Christmas ornaments, several books about terrible mothers, and 1 wayward golf ball from a sand trap that would save her from ever having to put on those god-awful shoes again.
That's no good. The reason I learned French was because of a girl. When I was about 14 years old, I took a class trip to France for a few weeks during the summer. Now, at the time, my vocabulary consisted of yes, no, and toaster. Frankly, I just went to have fun. But little did I know that that trip ahead of me would change my life forever. The class spent about 3 weeks touring this and that, visiting museums, and most likely annoying the hell out of the chaperoning teachers. I did a homestay with a very warm family, the DuPonts. I still maintain that whenever a person studies abroad, more is learned at the dinner table than anywhere else. Well, anyway, the weeks went by relatively uneventfully in comparison to my very last day of the trip. I remember it like it was yesterday. There I was, walking down the cliché cobblestone streets of Strasbourg, stressing about what I was going to do for the rest of summer after I had returned home. I had just gotten off the bus and was on my way to meet up with the rest of my class in front of the town cathedral when all of a sudden, it happened. Her name was Marie. She was the most beautiful person, nay, angel I had ever imagined. We didn't make eye contact at first because the entire world disappeared at that very moment. But when I got her attention, I tried my very best to communicate with her about whatever I could. I'm telling you, she had a $100 smile. The way she just looked at me, it was all I needed to become a man, rather than the boy I had been when I woke up that morning. In my very limited capacity, I explained that I was visiting from America and that I would love to keep in touch. And that's how I got her email address. By the time I left Strasbourg that evening, I had a mission. I had promised myself that I would do whatever it would take to be with Marie. I'm going to go back home and learn this girl's language, come back to France, have dinner with her family so that everyone will love me. And then Marie and I will get married and live happily ever after. I told myself. And upon my return home, I gathered all the textbooks that were used in every single French class offered at my school. And I spent the rest of my semester, I lost myself here, what's going on? Spent the rest of summer learning vocabulary, declination, tenses, and conjugations. I would talk to myself out loud so as to get into the habit of thinking on my feet. Finding the subject matter was never difficult because I would always use my quickly developing skills to talk about Marie. Whatever the books couldn't tell me, I learned from the computer thanks to dial-up internet. When the school year started, the teachers were quick to note my passion and diligence, and they often met with me after hours to have private sessions. After 2 semesters, I was 3 whole years ahead of my classmates. And through all of this, I made a point of not keeping in good touch with Marie. Because I wanted to surprise her with my drastic awakening. After that year, and for the second summer in a row, I went to France. And I gave Marie plenty of notice of my trip, although I was very careful not to disclose my real motivation for returning to France. If I were to woo her family, it had to be a surprise. When I arrived in Strasbourg, I stayed once again with the DuPonts. They provided the emotional support I needed to succeed, although they didn't know that I was using them for my own benefits. The time came for me to make my move. I remember it was an unseasonably chilly evening, and as I got off the bus a few blocks away from Marie's home, I looked down and saw that my hands were trembling. Plowing them deeper into my pockets, I realized that my teeth were chattering as well. I don't know if it was the adrenaline rush during these timeless seconds before I knocked on Marie's door, or if I was simply reacting to the chilly zephyr of the July evening. Marie's father, a petite man with a gentle disposition, opened the door expectantly and welcomed me into his warm home. Come, come! Marie mentioned that her pen pal from America would be in town, and I insisted that we have you for dinner. So glad you could make it. Marie's upstairs. She'll be down in a few minutes. Everything was going as planned. My future father-in-law was taking a liking to me already. Pen pal, though? I wondered. Well, Marie must have underplayed our relationship to her dad to give me more credibility. He guided me straight to the kitchen, introduced me to his wife, and offered me cheese and crackers paired with a Alsatian specialty, a white wine called Gewürztraminer. His wife, my future mother-in-law, was surprisingly and uncomfortably cold. Frankly, I was shocked by her deeply ill-natured demeanor. She was a larger woman with a face that was aged way beyond its years. As I write this now, I imagine this woman has likely evolved into something of a hollow-faced jack-o'-lantern. Wine in hand, I toured the house with my future father-in-law. He proudly showed me a pair of antique carved wooden horses that he got from a collector of some sort. Some paintings on the wall, which I didn't really care for, but could easily forgive his taste. And finally, some photos on display from a family ski trip in the Alps. We go every year. Be sure to give my information to your parents so we can all go together next year. Oh. Marie's mom came out of the kitchen shortly with a big bowl of pumpkin soup. She barked at us to sit so she could serve us because she didn't want to keep standing there. Henry, Marie's little brother, bounced down the stairs on his toes and instantly chose the seat next to me. He looked surprised when I saw that I was his sister's age. I thought you were my dad's friend from America. Do you know Marie? She's never mentioned you. Yeah, Marie definitely downplayed what she and I had. No bother. My future brother-in-law started bombarding me with questions about American sports and video game and fashion. Excellent. Marie finally appeared from the back salon. Time stopped. The person in front of me was even more celestial than the girl I had been dreaming about for so many days and nights. Marie said, "Hi," and sat down across from me. I couldn't quite figure out the look on her face. Whatever was going through her mind, it was clear to me that she was having difficulty restraining herself from lunging across the table and kissing me with full force. I gave her a charming smirk and my sexiest hello. Dinner proceeded quickly, and my confidence was building. Engaging in linguistically complex small talk with my soon-to-be in-laws, I confirmed that my French skills were more than sufficient to proceed to the next phase of my mission. I had crossed an ocean to reach this point in time, and this was it. I poured a glass of rouge for myself, and turning to Marie across the table, filled her glass as well. Our eyes met, and I could feel myself drowning. There would be plenty of time to be lost when everything was said and done, but for now I had to make my move. A year prior, when Marie and I first met, I hadn't had words for her. This time, I was prepared to tell her that our dinner together was the beginning of the rest of our lives. 18 words. My proclamation had been written and revised countless times over the past year, and now it was just 18 beautiful words, polished and refined with surgical precision and crafted to carry the fire of my love and ignite 1,000 sleeping suns of Marie's soul. I calmly placed my silverware down with textbook-like etiquette, sat up, straightened my wristwatch with cool and powerful hands, pulled in my cheeks ever so slightly to give myself a Greek god-like jawline, and leaning in towards Marie, I said, "You're the worst! I can't believe you're doing this to me." Marie didn't even notice me. She didn't even realize that my lips were less than a foot away from hers. She had all but forgotten my presence because she was just then turning to face her dad and whisper scold him for interrupting her plans for the evening. "I told you I had plans to go to the mall with Claire and Suzanne tonight. Do you have any idea how boring this guy is? Why couldn't he just come next week when I'll be out of town?" My future father-in-law had been keeping his face aimed at his plate, so as not to show anyone at the table the expression on his face. He looked back up at me for a microsecond and apologized profusely with his eyes, and then back down at his plate. He was turning white. Marie was turning red. I was turning green. It took me 1 year to learn her language. It took me 5 minutes to learn her disrespectful, spoiled, condescending personality that wasn't just mean, but overall repulsive. The end. P.S. 3 years later, I learned Russian for a girl named Anna. She turned out she was a lesbian. Thanks, everyone.
Around 8:35 this morning, I got a request from nearby my house and went to pick up my rider. When I was outside, I called him to let him know I was there, and he seemed a little flustered and said he would come outside to talk to me. He came outside. I got a good look at his face. The right half of his nose was missing. It looked as if it had been recently bitten off by a vicious animal. It was bright red. It was obviously the kind of thing you're not supposed to stare at, so I didn't look at it too much. Anyway, he told me to get in his driveway and mentioned that he hadn't been expecting me until 9:15. It was 8:45. He told me to wait in his driveway, and he went back inside his house. And I canceled on him, because no way am I just waiting in someone's driveway for 30 minutes. I drove to a nearby parking lot and got to reading a book. 30 minutes later, I get another ride request, and it turned out to be the same half-nosed guy. I thought, maybe I shouldn't take this. He might be mad that I canceled on him. But then I thought, whatever happens, happens. And I went to go pick him up. Came outside and got in the car right away and said he was sorry about before ordering the ride too early, and told me he had set Uber to get him a ride at 9:15. I explained that Uber's order a ride in advance service doesn't actually work. It's always best to order a ride at the very moment that you need one. Anyway, I confirmed the address with him and got going, and then he told me he needed to go to the bank first. He gave me directions towards the Chase Bank, which was in the opposite direction of his destination. On the way there, he said something about how I would probably leave him at the bank, and I said I would wait for him, and then I thought about it, and I asked how long he would be. He told me it would be 10 or 15 minutes, so I told him he could order another Uber, and I'd probably end the ride. He said that was fine, and then we got to the bank, and he told me to park in a parking spot, and then got out of the car and said, wait right here, this won't take long. I was confused because of the conversation we just had about me not waiting for him, but he took off before I could say anything. He left some personal belongings in the car too, so I couldn't just take off. I thought about grabbing his stuff and taking it into the bank and giving it to him and telling him to just order another ride. But I took the opportunity to smoke a cigarette instead, thinking he might be out by the time the cigarette was over. And about a minute after I finished it, he came out of the bank. He got his wallet out, took out a $20 bill and handed it to me. And said he wasn't rich, but he felt like he had to pay me to say sorry about ordering the ride too early, and also for waiting for him at the bank. We got back into the car. I asked him if he was really ready to go to his destination, and he said that he was. We took off. He looked to be in his mid-60s, and he had one of those old Texas accents that dudes from Richmond, Rosenberg typically seem to have. He told me how he'd been driving a Honda, and it had 360,000 miles on it, and how it had died on him in the middle of the road near his house on his way to work the week before, and then he worked at the horse track some 30 miles away. He mentioned the outrageous price to have the car towed, over $400, and the car wasn't even worth as much as that. He told me he'd been in a terrible accident years ago, that he was hit by an 18-wheeler while he was riding a motorcycle, and it messed him up real bad. Humpty Dumpty done all broke to pieces, he said. He mentioned that they thought he was a goner when the ambulance showed up on the scene, and then that he wouldn't live to get to the hospital. And once he was at the hospital, it had taken 5 doctors to put him back together. I assumed this was how he lost half his nose, but didn't ask. He talked about having a shattered skull, shattered jaw, lost vision in one eye, lost most of his teeth, that he had a hip replacement. He apologized for cussing so much. He used the term "some bitch" a lot. I told him he could say whatever he wanted around me, that I cussed too. Nearly everyone does. He said he had a potty mouth, but the one thing he never did was take the Lord's name in vain. And if he ever did, then he immediately prayed for forgiveness. He mentioned that the hospital bill came out to $60,000. I asked if the trucking company paid for it. Hit and run, he said. He never even knew who hit him. His destination was a place where he would meet with a guy from Craigslist about buying a car, some kind of Nissan, he told me. He mentioned that he had taken a course in electrical engineering at a junior college many years ago, and mentioned the power of knowledge. How if you have knowledge other people need, they'll pay you for it. After a little while, he said there was a chance he might not like the look of the car he was going to buy. He might not decide to buy it. And then he would pay me an extra $10 to stick around and wait to see if he bought the car or not, so I could take him back home in case he needed a ride back. I told him that Uber drivers generally don't like to wait around on uncertain rides, and that he could get another Uber within minutes if he decided he needed one. The address I had was a place called Alexander Greek Restaurant, and I pulled into the little strip center where it was located. The guy said we were in the wrong place. We had just passed an apartment building, which is where he was supposed to meet the guy. A place of residence, he noted. But it was behind us on a one-way street, so we took a slight detour to loop around and get back to where we had been to get to the apartment building. When we got there, we drove around looking for somebody, and he got on the phone with the guy selling the car, told us he was outside Alexander Greek Restaurant, and that he had seen us passing by, so we went back to there. And he saw the guy selling the car this time around, and I stopped to let him out. And he fist bumped me. Told me, have a nice day. I wonder if he bought that Nissan.
Hello. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to adjust some things. I love walking around naked. Always have. That little girl, all dressed up in her Sunday best, flashing Disney panties to the entire church? That was me. When we would go to the beach, I'd barely notice if my bottoms had been pulled down by a wave. My little toe-headed, copper-tone ass just hanging out there for all to see. I was too busy to be bothered with nonsense like bikini bottoms. I was just a fun, loving, silly girl enjoying life in the moment. Growing up a daughter of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, or WASPs, as we so kindly refer to ourselves, we learned early to mind our manners. Elbows off the table, always share, be considerate, listen to your elders, and never argue. When someone asks, "How are you doing?" you are to always respond in a positive manner, no matter how shitty you felt or how terrible your day has been. My family turned being polite into an Olympic sport. As one would assume, this didn't always align with my flasher tendencies, but as a cute little kid, you get away with murder, or for me, a felony charge. As I stumbled into my teenage years, the silly little girl grew into an independent young woman, and you can bet your and my bottom that I didn't care about manners. I became the antithesis of reserved and morphed into the life of the party, cool and self-assured. I took up respectable nerdy hobbies like swim team and theater, and then complemented them with hobbies like drinking and smoking, skinny dipping, flashing, mooning. I was completely aloof, determined and shameless. It's no shock that dating came early, as boys seemed to flock to my charismatic and wily nature, known better in your adult years as crazy. It didn't take long for me to share my love of nudity with them, somewhere between learning their favorite song and finding a space with a door. Sex quickly became a game, and one that I was fucking great at. I was a dedicated steward of my craft, disconnected almost entirely from complication or meaning. Getting naked was just part of having fun and enjoying life. My life was a mashup of Usher and Ludacris. I did want to make love in that club and in the garden and in the dirt. Through my teenage years and into my 20s, I dated a series of outstanding individuals. Kevin, the weed-smoking drummer with nipple rings. Richie, the stuck-up lefty pitcher from a nearby private school. The guy from the YMCA, my high school piano teacher. Mike, the sexy as hell asshole. Mike, the sensitive artist. Mike, the pre-med student. Mike and Nate from the rugby team. My father used to say, "Keep aiming low and you'll never be disappointed." Which turned out to be delightfully ironic, given I wasn't the one doing the aiming. Much to my family's delight, I soon found Ben, a handsome, coy young man with an ear-to-ear smile and a quiet sense of humor. We had known each other through mutual friends for about a year, but given my cheeky presence and his gentle demeanor, we weren't terribly close. Okay, he was terrified of me. One fateful night at a party, our stars aligned. The night was in full swing, and I was at the point between very drunk and I don't know where my shirt is drunk. The party was boring me, and I needed to be entertained. Then I spotted him. "We are so getting naked later," I called out to him from across the kitchen. This tactic had worked countless times before. No, we are not," he managed to blurt out through his enormous grin while scurrying away. What the fuck? He was the first person to ever say no to me. Wait a minute. This was a twist. I want to play this game. I had to have him. Once he surrendered, shortly thereafter, Ben was my guy, and that was that. We became inseparable best friends. My shenanigan days were behind me, or at least behind closed doors with Ben. And soon we decided to try our hand at the complicated journey towards adulthood together. Our engagement photo was the two of us chest bumping midair. This was our romance. We were invincible, the couple. Always laughing, rarely an argument, plenty of sex. I loved sleeping naked next to him. I felt comfortable. It was exactly what I wanted. We moved to a different state, got our own place, married, adopted dogs, and started careers. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, we didn't have a care in the world. As long as we were having fun, the rest of the world didn't matter. Years went by, and as life goes, as it typically does, it got hard. His company went bankrupt, my company closed. Health, money, family, adult problems started to surface. But the real problem was that we only knew how to have fun together. We didn't know how to do anything else, nevertheless communicate about our inadequacies as partners. For a time, I was my reserved, waspy self, not wanting to start an argument or make matters worse. I was good. I was okay. I was fine. I was fine. I was fine. I became paralyzed, miserable, notably less fun. I was not fine. We talked for months. As couples therapy didn't work out, I went on to therapy on my own. I was determined to find a solution. We still loved each other. It wasn't too late. Bringing home conversations and exercises for us, we tried our best to learn how to evolve to our new situation. Every Wednesday and Sunday, we self-mediated our own hard conversation sessions. This ridiculous, regular rhythm guarding us from conflict during the rest of the week. On hard conversation days, we would struggle to be open in a way we hadn't needed to before. We tried our best to be vulnerable, to listen, to argue, to empathize, to be strong, to admit we were wrong, to evolve. On off days, we tried to remember what normal felt like. Slowly, we just stopped having normal days. We stopped laughing. I cried every single day. I started wearing clothes all the time. I didn't want to be naked around him anymore. I didn't really want to be around him anymore. We separated shortly thereafter. One moving truck and two pathetic bodies moved 12 years of life into two separate apartments. We were wasps the whole day, being considerate to each other and gentle to what pieces of our life the other person claimed. 10 muted hours, and in order of a Whataburger later, we parted ways, not knowing when we would see each other again. Wednesdays and Sundays were over, for now. I walked into my new apartment, finally alone. I found myself surrounded by a smell of cardboard and industrial cleaner. I looked around and took physical stock of my life. A couch, a few boxes, a roll of toilet paper. Properly depressing. Where did we go so wrong? What will happen to us, to me? What could I have done to avoid this? What the fuck am I doing? Feeling the cascade of thoughts mounting up, I suddenly stopped myself. I drew the blinds, poured a glass of wine, turned on the music, and took off my clothes. Being naked meant something different now. It wasn't the opposite of covering up and being waspy, but it wasn't the untethered, free-flowing fun from my youth. Between the arguments and the silence, I learned I was more complicated than proper manners and a good time. I learned to value my idiosyncrasies, weaknesses, and emotions. I learned to be vulnerable and have conflict. I learned that I expected something different in a partner. I learned how to respect myself. This was a different me, an evolved me, a more confident me, a me that was only hopeful, not resolved. Finally, naked with my own thoughts, I danced a little dance and smiled for the first time in months. Thanks.
Good evening. On Beets and Trust Issues. My friend Sean was getting married, and all he wanted to do as a bachelor party was to go tubing down the Frio River for the weekend with 4 of his closest friends. It was simple, sweet outing that elicited absolutely no pushback from the wives and girlfriends of those involved. A week before the trip, we naturally started a group text in order to coordinate logistics. 3 in each vehicle. I would bring the floating cooler, someone else booked the hotel, etc. Then the most important issue was addressed. Who would bring what alcohol? Someone offered to bring Jello shots, Sean would bring some vodka, and someone suggested we should bring some Beets as well. I think I can safely say that everyone else in the group glazed over this obvious autocorrect fail and simply affirmed that yes, we should bring some beers. Most likely something light and drinkable for the long haul. But I'm not everyone else. I happen to be a very good cook, and I really enjoy Beets. I like to prepare them cubed and roasted in the oven with a bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper, balsamic vinegar, and rosemary. They're delicious. I figure everyone else would get a chuckle out of me bringing some on the trip, and we would enjoy a nutritious snack packed with iron and B-complex vitamins. That Saturday morning, we met at Sean's house, and I, as promised, brought my floating cooler packed with ice, a 12-pack of Shiner Bock, and a pint-sized container of roasted beets. And off we went. Of the group of 5, 2 of us, Steven and I, were single. Sean was engaged, and the other 2 were married. Sean's brother-in-law had been married about a year, and then there was Rusty, whose wife was 3 months pregnant and had been married for about 6 months. And really, Rusty was the only one I was a little worried about on this trip because he becomes a belligerent dick when he drinks too much. We rented our tubes, got in the freezing river, and began the day of drinking and bullshitting. Talked about life, work, marriage, and eventually, Rusty opened up a floaty cooler with the Shiner and the Beets. He saw the container and promptly inquired what exactly I had brought. The Beets! Remember? I replied, straight-faced. His quizzical look indicated that he did not, and he flatly asked me what I was talking about. It was in the group text. You said we should bring some Beets. And I did. I stopped and, feigning surprise, asked, what? Are you saying I'm the only one who brought Beets? Vince, I'm pretty sure you're the only one on the whole river who brought Beets today, he laughed. Are they good, he asked. I've never had them before. Yeah, I like them. They have a bit minerally taste to them, but they're pretty tasty and really good for you. He tried a couple and declared them delicious. Hey, he yelled at the group, y'all want to try some Beets Vince made? They're really good. Instead, the group inquired rather pointedly as to why the fuck I had brought Beets to go tubing on the river. To which I retorted that it was because it was an obvious autocorrect mistake in the group chat and that I, unlike some other people on the trip, know how to commit to a bit. The conversation quickly devolved into riffing on Beets-based puns. Terrible puns about hot beets, dropping beets, and wiki freshness of beets. After about 2 hours of drinking and floating, we were all appropriately drunk, and as feared, Rusty started his transformation into Mr. Hyde. He and Steve had found a sweet Peyton Manning Broncos jersey floating on the river at the same time, and after a tugging match, Rusty gave up and let Steve have the jersey. Then, out of spite, he snatched Steve's prescription glasses off his face and tossed them in the water in front of him. They slowly began to sink, and Steve, mostly blind without his glasses, quickly lost them in the murky river. God damn it, what'd you do that for? Steve raged. I set them down in the water 6 inches from you, Rusty calmly insisted. You should have been able to grab them, he yelled. Here, let's stop for a second, and I'll dive with you to help you find them, Rusty offered on apparently everyone's behalf. And so it began, the great drunken dive of our time. We dove again and again, trying to find Steve's glasses. The river was at least 8 feet deep and incredibly murky. Visibility was approximately 8 inches, and no one had thought to bring goggles because, I don't know, hubris? After about 15 minutes of drunken diving, I, a veritable Shiner Bock Cousteau, emerged triumphantly from beneath the surface. I got it, I announced. You found them? Steve cried incredulously. No, but I found money, a $100 bill. I yelled, waving it in the air. Sean was the only one excited for me. Exhausted, we finally accepted that the glasses were lost. got back in our tubes, and continued the ride with Steve and Rusty arguing about who was to blame for the lost glasses. Some pushing and attempted tube flipping ensued, with neither able to flip the other's tube, but with Rusty managing to lose his wedding ring in the process. Shit! My wedding ring, he cried frantically. It just slipped off in the water. Anna's gonna be so pissed. Y'all gotta help me try and find this. And maybe I'll find another $100, I offered unhelpfully. Back into the river we dove again, bent on finding the heart of the Frio. Between the sun, the beer, the beets, the cold water, and the diving, I was getting nauseous. Eventually, we gave up on the search, got back in the tubes, and discovered that while diving, Sean's brother-in-law had also lost his wedding ring in the river. Shell-shocked, we quietly continued to float and figured out how the brother-in-law and Rusty were going to replace their respective rings. The rest of the trip was relatively quiet. We spent the night in Austin and drove back to Houston the next morning. Rusty ended up paying for Steve's replacement glasses, and both he and Sean's brother-in-law ended up finding identical rings to their respective originals on Amazon for about 80% less than what they'd paid at the jewelers. About a month later, Rusty, his wife, and I sat at a bar watching the Astros game and reminiscing about the trip and how much it actually ended up costing us. I reminded him about the Beets, and we all had another laugh about it. "Oh man, I didn't even tell you about what happened with the rest of them," he laughed and rolled his eyes. "Oh, that's right. I forgot to take them home. Did you end up with them?" I asked. "Dude, so we didn't know what beets do to your pee." In case you're unfamiliar, eating red beets will absolutely make your pee and poop blood red. So we were eating them when we got back, and all of a sudden I started peeing blood, right? Just then, his wife interjected. I was also peeing red after I ate some, but I didn't say anything because I thought it had something to do with the pregnancy. But when he told me he was peeing blood, I was like, what the fuck did you guys do on that trip? "Oh no," I gasped. "So all you knew was that he'd gone on a bachelor party with his friends. 2 of them had lost their wedding rings, and you were now both peeing blood." The dots connected in my head as I blurted out the most obvious conclusion at which she must have arrived. "You must have thought he'd taken off his ring, banged a stripper who probably stole the ring, gotten some crazy STD, and then given it to you too?" "Yes, exactly. Oh my God," I wheezed. You must have been ready to beat him." "Holy shit, Vance, shut up." And the rest of the 4th inning was spent riffing on beats. But really, those are some sick-ass beats. Thank you.